You know, when we think about the future of our environment, we're almost always looking ahead. But what if the biggest clues about where we're going are actually buried deep in the past? Today, we're going to dig in and find out why the ghosts of yesterday might just be the key to building a much better tomorrow. Let's get into it.
So let's start with a puzzle. And it's a really frustrating one. A puzzle that costs us billions of dollars and just countless hours of work, year after year.
And this is the core of it, right here. Why is it that some environmental problems just never seem to get solved? We throw so much money, so much effort, so many brilliant people at these issues, and still, they just stick around. So what's the deal?
Okay, let's take agricultural runoff. For decades, we have been working hard, putting conservation practices in place to stop all that nitrogen and phosphorus from getting into our rivers.
And yet, after all that time and all that effort, in so many places the water quality is barely budging. It feels like we're just pouring all this work into a bucket with a massive hole on the bottom.
Or how about this one, mountaintop mining? After an area is mined, huge, and I mean huge amounts of money are spent on what's called reclamation, trying to restore the land to the way it was before.
But the data is pretty clear. Even after 3 decades, which should be more than enough time for a forest to start bouncing back, the trees just don't come back. It's obvious we've been missing a major piece of the puzzle.
Well, that missing piece actually has a name. It's called landscape legacies. Think of them as environmental ghosts, the echoes of things that we humans did a long, long time ago that are still hanging around.
So the official definition is that a landscape legacy is the persistent effect of past human activities on the environment. It's kind of like the land has a memory. The soil, the water, the whole system. It doesn't forget what's been done to it. And that memory shapes what's happening today and what can happen tomorrow.
Now, these legacies aren't all the same. We can break them down into 3 main types. First, you've got structural legacies. These are physical changes, like building a dam or a road. Then there are biogeochemical legacies. That's all about the buildup of chemicals, like fertilizer in the soil. And finally, you have ecological legacies, which are the lasting changes to the actual plants and animals in an ecosystem. And believe me, they are everywhere. We're talking about everything from the obvious stuff, like radioactive waste from the Manhattan Project during World War II, to the salt we put on our roads every single winter. The loss of millions of beavers centuries ago has left a structural legacy that literally changed the shape of our rivers today. And get this, researchers have even traced phosphorus legacies all the way back to decomposing wildebeest bones in the Africa's Mara River. So yeah, these ghosts are absolutely everywhere.
So, if we're going to actually get a handle on these legacies, we have to totally change how we think about time. We can't just think in years or even decades. No, we have to start thinking in centuries. This timeline really puts it all into perspective. I mean, look at this. Way back in the 3rd century, when the Roman Empire collapsed, it took one lake in Switzerland 50 years just to start recovering from their pollution. Fast forward to the 1800s, the colonial mill dams built back then are still messing with river sediment in the U.S. today. Even something as recent as the Clean Air Act from the 1980s shows us there's a multi-decade lag before you see the full benefits. The timescales are just mind-blowing.
So how in the world do we actually see these centuries-long patterns? Well, the answer is long-term data from dedicated, publicly funded research sites. These places are like libraries of environmental history. They let us separate what happened way back when from what's happening right now. Without them, we'd basically be flying blind.
But here's the good news. This isn't just a story about all the problems we can't seem to fix. By understanding these legacies, we can also see what actually works. We can find some real, genuine hope in the lessons that history teaches us.
I really love this quote from the research paper. It just nails it, right? It reminds us that everything we do today is creating the legacy of tomorrow. And by looking at past successes, we can see that positive change is absolutely possible.
And let's talk about one of the biggest success stories out there, the Clean Air Act. This was a landmark piece of policy. It was designed to go after big problems like acid rain by cutting down emissions from things like factories and power plants.
And here it is. Here's the payoff, the real, tangible result of that action. Across 14,000 lakes in the U.S., water clarity has been getting better, on average, by 0.5 centimeter every single year since 1984. That's what a hopeful legacy looks like in action.
Okay, so this is the crucial point. Understanding these legacies gives us a totally new way of looking at restoration.
It forces us to stop trying to fight the ghosts of the past and start working with them to build a better future.
Looking through this legacy lens completely flips the script on our goals. The old way of thinking was, let's restore this place to how it was, right? Back to some pristine, untouched state. But that so often leads to failure because it ignores that the legacies have made permanent changes. The new goal, the smarter goal, is to accept that those legacies are here to stay. And instead, we design for a future reality. We create new, functional ecosystems that can actually thrive in this changed world.
And the beaver story is the perfect example of this in action. The old goal was simple, just put beavers back in the river. But that didn't work a lot of the time because the rivers themselves were totally different. That's the legacy of their absence. So the new goal is way cooler. We build what are called beaver dam analogs. These are structures people build that copy the function of a real beaver dam. See the difference? We're not trying to perfectly recreate the past. We're trying to bring back the vital jobs the ecosystem lost.
So it really all comes down to this. We have to understand these environmental ghosts. We have to acknowledge them. They aren't just going to disappear. But by learning their stories, we can finally stop making the same old mistakes and start making real, lasting progress toward healing our future.
And that leaves us with one last really important question to ask ourselves. When you look at our actions today, our industries, our habits, our policies, what kind of legacy are we creating right now for the generations who are going to have to live with the choices we make?